About 10 months ago, I made a guide on gamma Dopplers for CS2, but since then, there have been a few visual changes, so this is my official updated gamma Doppler guide. This is by far the most confusing finish for newer players, so I will explain everything and make it as simple as possible. Let's get into it. Let's start with some general info. Gamma Dopplers use the anodized multicolored finish, and they only come in minimal wear and factory new between 0.0 and 0.07 float. That makes minimal wear gamma Dopplers quite rare, and 00 floats are actually pretty common. For karambits, around 15% of the total supply has a float of 0.009 or lower. Next up, there's a total of 10 knives that can get this finish. Bowies, flips, falchions, shadow daggers, huntsmans, butterflies, M9s, karambits, gut knives, and bayonets. Now, let's look at how this finish actually works. Gamma Dopplers are divided into 5 separate finishes, those being the 4 phases and the gem finish, which is the emerald. A common misconception I see with this finish is that people assume Gamma Dopplers are one finish with 1,000 different patterns, where each pattern is a different phase, but that's actually incorrect. Gamma Doppler is an umbrella term for 5 separate finishes, with each one having 1,000 individual patterns, so in total there's actually 5,000 patterns that fall under the Gamma Doppler name. Unfortunately, CS2 doesn't tell you what phase you have when you check them in your inventory, but now that we've covered the basics, we can look at each individual phase and the highly coveted emerald finish. First up, we have phase 1. The easiest way to check what phase you have would be to check the finish catalog, and for phase 1 that number is 569. Here's the new updated inventory icon. The blade will have this blue color that is easily recognizable. In game, the general color breakdown for P1s is about 20% green and 80% blue and purple, but the actual color of the blade completely depends on the pattern. With most knives, you'll see bands of color that alternate between green, blue, purple, and here's a few examples of different pattern variation. Gamma Dopplers have a special feature where they change the accent color on specific knives, and each phase gets a different color. For phase 1, it's aquamarine green and applied on the butterfly handle, huntsman pins, shadow dagger handles, and the bowie handguard. Phase 1 Gamma Dopplers do have rare patterns, which I call diamond gems. It's basically knives that have crystal blue blades, and they're available on karambits, gut knives, bayonets, and flips. I already made a dedicated guide for diamond gems if you want to check it out, and as far as pricing goes, P1s are priced just a bit higher than P3 and P4, but it fluctuates. If you're interested in buying a Gamma Doppler knife for the cheapest price possible, I highly recommend checking out today's sponsor, which is GamerPay. GamerPay is a player-to-player trading site where you can buy and sell skins securely with excellent reviews on Trustpilot. There's a huge variety of knives for all price ranges, and it's very easy to find exact patterns, floats, and finishes at prices significantly cheaper than the Steam market. There's no buying fee and a 3% selling fee, so if you guys want to check it out, you can use my link in the description for a free $5 bonus. Next up, let's talk about phase 2. The finish catalog is 570, and the inventory icon will have either light green throughout the whole blade, or light green with a small dark spot. Phase 2 Gamma Dopplers have a color distribution of 80% light green and 20% dark green. Depending on the pattern, some knives will have exclusively light green, but some patterns do have that dark spot. On larger blades like the M9, you will always get a dark spot on the blade. Since P2s are primarily one color and look pretty similar to emeralds, they are the most desired phase and cost significantly more than the other 3 phases. The special accent color for P2s is olive green, and it's applied on the same 4 knives that we mentioned with P1s. Now, let's talk about the 2 rare pattern types that you can get with this phase, Max Green and Fake Emerald. Max Green patterns are for knives that always have the dark spot, but they feature this dark spot in the optimal position so the blade stays as bright as possible. Patterns differ for each knife, but some examples are pattern 570 for the M9 and pattern 95 for the butterfly. Now, fake emeralds are patterns that make the blade full green with absolutely no dark spots, so they look nearly identical to emeralds with a small color difference. They're available on gut knives, karambits, bayonets, and flips, with pattern 350 being the #1 best fake emerald pattern for every knife. Next up, we have phase 3. The finish catalog is 571, and the icon will have this multicolored blade where you can see cyan, light green, and dark green. The general color distribution is 40% cyan, 30% green, and 30% dark green. This is a very general estimate because patterns can have huge variations. Some patterns will have a ton of cyan, some patterns will have a ton of green, and some will have the full mix of those 3. Similar to phase 1, the blade will always follow the same colorway. It goes green, dark green, cyan, and here's a few examples of how blades change from pattern to pattern on the M9. P3s are priced very similar to P4s and are just a bit cheaper than P1s, but once again, prices do fluctuate. The accent color is bright green for this phase and also applies to the same 4 knives. Now, for the rare patterns, Phase 3 is known as the cyan phase, where you can get patterns with nearly the whole blade covered in cyan, and these patterns are called cyan bits for karambits. The whole tip of the blade is cyan with green near the hilt, and there's a ton of patterns that you can find with this color layout. You can also find max cyan patterns on gut knives, flips, and bayos, but at the moment there is no dedicated pattern guide for these knives. Lastly, we have Phase 4. The finished catalog is 572, and the Steam icon will have cyan and lime green, which is exclusive to Phase 4s. The color distribution is around 40% cyan, 30% lime, and 30% dark green. Once again, this is another general estimate, and there's a ton of color variation between different patterns, but the main appeal of this phase is that lime color. I will mention that it did get a massive nerf in CS2, going from straight lime to a green color with a lime tint. The accent color is also lime, and the handles are insanely bright compared to the other phases. For pricing, P4s are very similar to P3s, and just a bit cheaper than P1s. Phase 4 can also get rare patterns, which are max lime, where the whole blade is green with a lime tint in brighter lighting. They're available on karambits, gut knives, flips, and bayonets, and they all share the same exact pattern IDs. And finally, we get to the most desired Gamma Doppler of them all, emeralds. Emeralds are considered gems of the Gamma Doppler finish, and are 10 times rarer than the other 4 phases. Their finished catalog is 568, and their Steam inventory icon has blades that are bright green, similar to Phase 2 but significantly brighter. Now for the color, all emeralds will be 100% marbled green, and recent buffs made the color even more vibrant than before. The only difference between patterns will be the outlines that we see on every Doppler and Gamma Doppler. Now for the accent color, instead of the reflective bright handles that we get with every other phase, emeralds actually have matte colored handles with teal instead of the typical green. For pricing, emeralds are significantly more expensive than the 4 phases, often costing 3 to 4 times more than the average phase. Lastly, let's talk about rare patterns. Emeralds typically have dark spots that make the blade darker in normal lighting, but you can get patterns where there's minimal dark spots, effectively making the blade even brighter than usual. Some good examples are pattern 211 on the karambit, pattern 73 on the M9, and pattern 126 on the butterfly. So that's pretty much the whole overview of this finish. If you found this guide helpful, consider subbing to the channel for more content like this. I have a ton of new guides coming soon, and with that being said, I hope to see y'all in the next video. Peace out, everyone.